So I wanted to talk about a little tool that's trying to take all this information that the AOP Wiki is doing and make it so you can kind of look at the bigger picture. It's not as detailed as Effectopedia is, and it's not meant to be sort of the repository of the eventual characterization of AOPs, but it's supposed to help you discover and explore AOPs in a much broader context. So Steve's already talked about the idealized version of an AOP, and this is aromatase inhibition. And as you said, it's not realistic. A lot of things may start in multiple places. It depends on what concentration they're exposed to. They may do different things. Things converge. But reality is really a beautiful mess. So what do we start doing with that? You have a lot of events happening. You have a lot of things moving together, especially in mixtures. So how do you start looking at that? So what we've tried to do is use the fact that AOPs in practice are really networks. And this is exactly what Steve was saying, kind of the simple networked one where you'd have conserved key events where they converge, multiple molecular initiating events converge on common key events. And ultimately, but they can actually end up in different outcomes, even though they share common key events. So this ends up with a network of things that start interacting in different ways. So it's difficult to look at that in a simple way with the AOP Wiki, because all we'll do is draw out for each AOP individually a graphic. Hristo, as he'll talk about, is starting to build that into Effectopedia, but much more in a quantitative context, I believe. So what we're trying to do is trying to find something that lets you sort of visualize and look at your data in a simple way, how it might interact in a more complex system. So what we've been developing is a little tool called AOP Xplorer. And the idea there is to take different AOPs as they're put into the wiki. They can get ported over to here, or you can enter them directly in and start to look at how they might share key events and how they might interact. So this is the opening page of that. And essentially, you can either search with keywords for specific key events, or you can pick from a list of AOPs. You can enter your own AOP. If you want to do that, you click here. You can enter a title of it and create an AOP. Or you can start with AOPs that have already been entered and start looking at those and editing new key events. And so what we're working on right now is trying to find out how we can feed all the information that's being put into the AOP Wiki and use that to populate the different fields within the AOP Explorer. And if you clicked on one of those boxes, you would get, whoops, this is actually what the whole aromatase inhibition one looked at, since everyone on this talk is looking at that. So if you clicked on the key event and looked at that, this is kind of representation you would get for a single AOP, where it would go from the molecular initiating event all the way down to the outcome at the population level, which is a declining trajectory. And one of the things that you can do with this file is it's Cytoscape Web, so you can download it as an XGM file and you can use it and manipulate it in other programs. If you're really interested in looking at what specific key events, how they might be shared across things, one example is thyroid hormone synthesis that's decreased. I've entered a number of AOPs for thyroid disruption. If you look at that, there we go. You look at that and you click on one complete AOP, what you actually get is it pulls from all the AOPs that are entered and looks at all connections to that key event there. So here's a molecular initiating event that goes through, that's thyroid peroxidase inhibition leading to thyroid hormone synthesis decreased. And once you have thyroid hormone synthesis decreased, you get decrease in thyroxine, T4 in the serum. It can lead to two different outcomes. One is cognitive dysfunction, which is the principal one, or it has been shown that you can also get hearing loss by impacting cochlear structure. In rats, actually, you can also get an increase in thyroid stimulating hormone serum levels, leading to thyroid hyperplasia and thyroid tumors. And that information is, like Steve said, it's actually, if you clicked here, oops, one too many. If you clicked here, all that information is actually included on the node or the edge. And you can see, it's a little buggy at the moment, but it tells you what species it is. So you can start looking at, well, is this AOP with what type of species? Here, it's really a good indicator because that lower left-hand arm there is really more for rats, not relevant to humans, whereas this arm right here, these key events and these outcomes are more relevant to humans. So all of the information, much of the information that's included in this from the wiki is actually included in these nodes here. I think I must have missed a slide. Where was it? Oh, there it is. So when you click on those nodes, they actually have all the same, much of the same information that's present in the wiki. So we patterned it off the wiki and Effectopedia to try to keep them compatible, so we could just port over information automatically from the wiki, populate these, and then you can start looking at networks of key events and still have the information available, so you can click on it and see, well, is this ARM potential outcome going to happen for humans or rats or things like that. So it has many of the same different fields that are filled. And right now you can fill them yourself. We have to change a few items on it, but essentially it works on the same idea with upstream causes and downstream effects that link different key events, molecular initiating events, and outcomes. We also have, as the wiki has, if I've lost the, oh well. There we go. We also have the chemical or chemical initiators that are potential ones. That's also in example initiators are in the wiki, so those would be in there. We also have that as something you can search for. So once you've entered those, or once they've been ported over, you can search for a chemical and look at all the adverse events that it might cause, or any of the key events or molecular initiating events it's been associated with. So we can start getting some very interesting information when you start putting things together in networks. Look at a more complex one. When I looked at, we can search for just all things leading to cognitive dysfunction that's in the database that we currently have. And there's 5 different or 6 different AOPs that connect to that, potential ones. They're not all relevant for humans. They're not all relevant in all situations, but there's 5 potential ones that they could lead to that. So this starts looking at how you might interact, different things might start interacting together, how you might pick different assays to monitor multiple adverse outcome pathways and start to look at mixtures. So it starts to show you the power of what you might be able to do just to integrate things together. So I think what we're trying to do is trying to provide a very simple way to visualize a lot of the data that's going to be entered in the AOP wiki and the complexity of it. And if you look at the examples, those kind of tell you that it really becomes useful because it becomes much more intuitive that these things need to interact. Multiple things lead to that. Different concentrations of chemicals of the same chemical will cause different outcomes, but they could all still be linked together. And you can start, once you look at this, then you can go to the AOP, to the wiki, to the Effectopedia, where Bristow's going to talk about how do you make these quantitative transitions and thresholds between different key events, which you want to start looking at. You need to know where do we want to start looking to do the research. So I think this type of work will help. So right now, we're working on trying to connect it essentially to the AOP wiki through the AOP KB so that we can port information that's filled into the wiki directly into the AOP Xplorer so you can look at multiple pathways. We're also going to be working on taking putative AOPs or computationally predicted AOPs based on literature and data mining, where you might generate hundreds of potential adverse outcome pathways, or there may be some very speculative adverse outcome pathways. Basically, adverse outcome pathways with high uncertainty, that haven't had a lot of human curation on them. Those can be put into the AOP Xplorer and give a way to start looking at them without having a high overhead for entering text and things like that. So if we can start doing that, then we can start feeding them back into the AOP KB, and we can start maybe getting people to adopt them, as Steve says, and try to fill them out and do more research on them, fill out more data on them, find out what gaps there are, and then hopefully all of that will help facilitate Effectivepedia, which is really doing a lot of the labor of trying to make it quantitative and standardize everything.